He is dubbed rugby's most wanted man right now. Bill Sweeney, CEO of the RFU. It is the LTIP bonus that has got people absolutely fuming.
We didn't request an LTIP. We had no say in the quantum of it. I will always look at this period as probably one of my greatest achievements is the finances of the RFU.
Is the RFU fit for purpose?
Yeah, I do think it is, but I do think there are changes necessary.
What is the number one problem that you have to solve?
I don't think we're attracting young people into the game. What you're asking for is complete revolution. You're talking about completely...
I don't think we're the only one.
No,
I think the game is at the point where revolution, otherwise it's...
You'd have to tear up the whole constitution of the RFU. You'd have to...
We're there.
Okay.
We're ready to go. Have you got the energy to turn this around?
The easiest thing to do now would be say, right, I've had enough of this stuff. I can't do that. I wouldn't do that. We've got some great stuff and we're just starting to land into the game.
Into the final moments, Alex Payne trying to keep this side going forward. Haskell takes it on now with just relentless chat, largely about himself. And there's Tyndall to add the finishing touch of glamour and World Cup winning stories. That is how you podcast.
Hello, Dream Team. Welcome along to this week's episode of The Good, the Bad and the Rugby. It is a big one this week as we sit down with the man at the very centre of English rugby's latest storm, Bill Sweeney, CEO of the RFU. Before we get into it, the niceties. And as ever, a very big thank you to Continental Tyres, our go-to for premium tyres. Continental safety, performance and grip are the name of the game. The complete opposite of this unpredictable show where we're never quite sure how the journey will unfold. So buckle up and enjoy the ride. And that very much applies to you, Bill, this afternoon. Good on you for being here. He is dubbed rugby's most wanted man right now. He is under more scrutiny than perhaps anybody in the game, with an SGM looming where the motion is for his employment to be terminated ASAP. Elsewhere, there are calls for his resignation mounting, and they are coming from all angles. The entire rugby community is watching, waiting, and most have got something to say on the matter. This has been described as a critical moment for English rugby. The interim chair of the RFU, Sir Bill Beaumont, has said as much himself, and the stakes couldn't really be any higher. If you have not been reading your rugby newspapers recently, there is currently backlash over bonus payments to RFU management despite record losses, at the same time as 42 members of the RFU have been made redundant. There is backlash over the RFU's handling of the tackle height law. There is backlash over the financial instability of professional clubs, the challenges around the championship restructuring and below, and a grassroots game that's increasingly feeling cut adrift and feels it is on a knife edge. It's worth remembering that although the Red Roses rolled on last year with an unbeaten season and another Grand Slam, England's men's team had a 42% win ratio last year with wins against Italy, Wales, Japan and Ireland at the very death. Today, we get into it. If perception is 9/10 of the law, where are the RFU going wrong? How can they rebuild trust? And is this really a turning point for the sport that we all love? Bill Sweeney, welcome to The Good, the Bad and the Rugby. That's quite a charge sheet. The headlines take over all the newspapers. Fair, harsh, anything you immediately want to address in that?
You've said it. I think you said, perception is 9/10 of reality. So if that's the feeling out there, then that's something we clearly need to address. As you'd expect me to say, I don't personally think that's a fair summary of where we are today. And we'll get into it now. We'll talk about long-term incentive programs, why they're there, how they came about, how they're paid. We'll talk about the finances of the RFU. That is the one I find the most difficult to deal with because we would have a completely different point of view in terms of the finances of the RFU. There are definitely challenges around how do you build up a more viable second tier. We all want a stronger second tier in the game. You'd love to have a situation like you've got in France, but that takes some careful planning. We'll get into it, but we've got an independent chaired board now for the second tier with RFU and Championship Club members on there. We've just signed the PGA, which we call now the PGP because of partnership. And I think that will lead us into, that's just the start. I think that will evolve into more of a formalised joint venture between PRL and RFU. And that will take us into how do you govern the entire professional game, club and also country, through a different structure than we currently have. So you have a dedicated board that makes decisions on behalf of that. You haven't spoken about Nations Cup. So you've got the Nations Cup issue, which we were very much leading on in March of 2020 to get that going. And we've got some really exciting news, which is coming on the commercial front. But all of that means nothing.
Yep.
If you go to a community club these days, and I tend to go to community clubs at weekends rather than the professional game. When you're there and you're in the bar afterwards, the conversation is around, I'm finding it really hard to recruit volunteers. I can't retain volunteers. The cost of running a club is going up. The taxes are going up. Utilities are going up. And we get that because we're dealing with that at Twickenham. Or why is the amateur game paying players? Why can't you fix that up? And there's a whole range of complaints and frustrations that you find in the community game. And all this other stuff that we're doing, no matter how great we think it is, doesn't really relate to them. They just want to know about, right, I've got the same number of players I had in the club, but they don't play as much as previously, so therefore it puts pressure on the teams. How do I get my side out at the weekend? How do I make sure I've got spectators coming to the club? So there is that unrest in there that we need to take seriously.
Once the game turned professional 28 years ago, whatever it was, you suddenly had the professional game that had to be run at the same time, whilst also trying to run that community game. And I don't ever feel that we've had a separation of how you're going to deal with both the professional game and the community game. Yeah,
because the RFU has got a really broad range of accountabilities. If you get into it, and I've worked in the corporate world, and now
can I rephrase that and just ask you directly: is the RFU fit for purpose?
Yeah, I do think it is, but I do think there are changes necessary. I don't think applying the same structures that we've got in the RFU now that existed when the game went professional in '95 and prior to that. When you consider the challenges we have either on the commercial front, very sophisticated, complex commercial deals, running a venue, running a national governing body, community game, working with PRL on the professional game, we don't actually control the Premiership. I mean, that's a separate legal financial entity and all the clubs are run independently. But if you look at the complexity over that, owning the stadium, running a stadium, one of the biggest stadiums in the country, is the structure of the RFU best set up to deal with all of that, or do we need to reconsider that? I think what we've done with a professional game partnership, and this goes to the question about the pro game and the community game, we are making that separation. But eventually it has to come into somewhere. It needs to report it. So it tends to come into, because we've got specialist people on the community side, and we've got specialist people on the pro side, and we've got specialist people on the stadium side. So what do? Do you divide it up into 3 or 4 separate companies, completely different NewCos? New Zealand tried that recently on the commercial side. So they set up an entirely different commercial company with Silver Lake, and you can understand exactly why they did it, and they've had some success with it. But when you separate it from rugby, they've found they've got some challenges with that. You can't always make a decision purely from a commercial perspective if you're not taking into consideration all of the rugby effects of that. So they've found they need to integrate that slightly more again.
Well, conversations you and I have had in the past, and my own personal impression of obviously being a professional sportsman for a long time, working often with the RFU in different guises now, is that it seemed at times often overstaffed with lack of communication between different areas of the business, and actually that it wasn't, like you asked, fit for purpose, that lots of people trying very hard, but there wasn't a lot of joined up thinking, there wasn't a lot of communication across buildings, there's a lot of agendas, and there is a lot of kind of, like I said, the bigger it seems, the more powerful the ever, like civil service, the yes minister, yes prime minister, the bigger budgets, the more people we need, the bigger, the more powerful we look. Well, actually,
the extra boards we put in,
the extra board, all this stuff we put in, it just seems like that's my impression of it is a business, and that actually it's not doing what it should do. Or it's doing stuff, but not doing as well as it should be.
Yeah, rugby's a complex landscape. You look at all the various different stakeholders in there. So you've got World Rugby, and clearly we overlap with them on various different things about how you commercialise events, what do we get for competing in a World Cup. You've then got Six Nations, which is quite a complex field, because you've got the Six Nations, plus you've got CVC as a 7th partner, and some of those rights are now centralised, and how we go to market for broadcast is centralised. Well, is that in the best interests of you, and how do you manage that relationship? It's working well, but it's quite complex. Then you have PRL, which is a separate entity that we work very closely with, and we've now got the professional game partnership. So yeah, you've got these lots of different entities. I suppose the question would be, is it the RFU is fit for purpose, or is rugby fit for purpose? If you look at all the various different stakeholders, are they all working together in the right way? I think that's another bigger question.
What's the answer to that?
Well, I think we're moving towards that now. If you look at what we're doing with PRL, I think
at what speed? I mean, we've been moving towards that since 1995.
No,
we're going to be dead.
No, but we signed it. So we've done the professional game partnership. That exists now, and that's a real partnership with PRL. We've got independently chaired board. You've got members of RFU on that board, members of PRL on the board, and member from the Rugby Players Association. So you've got the players represented there. We've got a joint marketing agreement in place now as well. So how do we pool our assets, whether it's international assets, club assets? How do we work together to generate more revenue jointly on that? So I would say that, is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. But it's the first step in the direction of how we work closer with PRL as the professional game in England. You look at what's happened with the Nations Cup. I mean, this is quite dramatic for the North and the South to actually get along and figure this thing out. So now you've got if you had Fiji and Japan down from the South, we've got a Nations Cup which is going to kick off in 26. Which hopefully is going to do a job for us on broadcast, which is critical. And we'll be setting up the right governance structure on how is that Nations Cup organised. But that's a collaboration between the North and South.
But doesn't that have huge implications for some of the Tier 2 teams as well?
No, because in 2030, and we're going ahead of ourselves a little bit here, but when we get to 2030, and you know the format of the Nations Cup, the summer coming together with the autumns and all the rest of it. So you'll have in the autumn, you'll have your 3 matches, then you go to a finals weekend, and you've got 1v1, 2v2, 3v3, but the final match will be the bottom of the Northern Hemisphere playing against the top of the emerging nations in the Northern Hemisphere. So, and that will be a promotion relegation game. Right. So you could have Georgia coming up, you could have Spain coming up, whoever's Portugal coming up. So that is designed to give the emerging nations the best possible chance to develop.
Okay.
So you've got these various things going on, which I think are trying to pull all the different stakeholders together.
And I think we've set off a sort of on quite a global direction. And I just sort of want to re-emphasise at this point that this table has always been about discussion. We're definitely not here to sort of burn anybody at the stake. And there are a lot of things that we're going to get into where it's a chance for you to have a response at the moment. There's a lot of people writing a lot of things, etc., etc. I want to start with you personally, though. Give us a sense of your mood at the moment.
I'd be lying if I said it was, not a difficult time. It's tricky when you've got all these issues that are out there. I'm very positive about it because what this has done, it's surfaced a lot of things that we can talk about. There's a huge amount of misinformation out there. And we haven't got onto the finances yet, but I'm dying to talk about that. We can talk about
We're going to start with that as the big category. But I just you and the situation you're in. It feels at the moment from the outside in that you are, as the RFU, losing the PR battle pretty spectacularly. Is this the start of the comeback? Can you turn the tide from what's being written and said at the moment?
Yeah, we haven't said much yet. And I think that depended on a few things. It depended on what did the chair, Tom Malube, what was he going to do? Was he going to stand down? Was he going to remain? So you're kind of waiting to hear that one.
Is that a discussion you have with him, or is that completely on his personal?
And do you know why he stepped down?
It would be a personal decision. I think he's probably looked at it and
too much noise.
I haven't discussed it in great detail. He had a farewell thing the other night, very low key thing. We didn't really get into the detail. But
does his standing down undermine your position if the chair appoint the CEO?
I don't think so. I don't feel that way. But that would be a decision that he would make himself personally. But you asked the question, how do I feel? I feel positive about it because when we get into all of these topics, all of the things we're doing at the moment in terms of how we're moving the game forward, and we've only just started on these. If you look at what the outcome is going to be of that, I feel very positive about the English game. So this is a chance to actually explain what that is and get it out there.
Is there a set of particular people that are out for you? You know about it because yourselves, the misinformation. We'll come on to it later. We saw Wayne Barnes' very well written defence of misinformation, which is always difficult in a world where we can't find the truth. But it seems like there is a bit of a Machiavellian, well, not Machiavellian, openly
Shakespearean,
I'm just wondering if are there a group of people they put, who is it?
It.
Well, I don't necessarily name them, but
it's not fun if you do.
I saw the beginning of your one last week. It's a bit like Succession. It's got all the ingredients in here. You've got disgruntled ex-RFU employees, you've got disgruntled ex-RFU chairs and CEOs, and you've got them sort of commenting from the sidelines. You've got disaffected factions in the game. I don't really want to get into that. I think if I got into that today and you start, and of course I know who they are, but if you start getting into that, you're into the swamp really quickly, and you're into mudslinging and this person.
That's where Hask lives.
That's where I live. No, I just wondered because it seems like when you talk about a situation like this, it's always very broad, and that's fine. I just wanted to know, do you know who they are, and do you genuinely think they're going out there and just saying whatever they can do to undermine you? Because from what Wayne Barnes says, that appears to be the truth.
Yeah, I mean, I do believe that. If you look at Wayne's letter, and he basically contradicts those statements that underpin the request for an SGM. And if you go through each one of those, they're false. They're not accurate. It's not accurate information. We are not in that financial position. We did not spend millions to get rid of Eddie Jones and the coaching staff. Eddie was on UK employment law notice period. So he got paid...
What is that, 3 months?
6 months. He was on 6 months. So he got paid a 6 months notice period. if you take all of the restructuring
but Bill,
costs,
with the greatest of respect,
why do you get out and
in
say
God's
that?
name does that not come out in public? Why is everybody writing?
Yeah.
He's had £1 million payoff and joins Australia 24 hours later.
I don't know.
Why does
That
so
was
much of
that
rugby?
was his 6 months, but
Oh, well, I presume that wasn't his.
yeah, he was on 6 months' notice.
Yes, sure. Okay, so it wasn't £1 million. And
No. So the total restructuring that year was £900,000. That included all the coaches leaving. It included Eddie leaving. It included a few other positions leaving.
Right.
So and then you get on to him going to Australia next off. So because he went down to the Southern Hemisphere, our lawyers said that the maximum time that we could enforce a non-compete was probably 3 months. Well, he'd already been there about a month anyway, so you've got 2 months. But I think there was a bigger thing at play here. You've got a coach who we've only won 4 Six Nations since 21 years. He won 3 of them in 16, 17 and 20 and a Grand Slam in 16. Took us to a World Cup final. You know, you've basically fired somebody because you say there's a performance issue. Then you're going to smack a restrict employment thing on them. And out of respect, I think we should have said, Eddie, you know, we've parted company. If we don't think you're doing a great job now, how can we possibly put a restriction on you to go somewhere else? So I think out of respect to, at the time, before the final sort of few matches, he had the highest win ratio in England.
Yeah.
So
I think it was frowned upon until then Australia went.
Actually,
well, somebody said it was a cunning plot. But it was like,
But Alex got a very good point. You know,
Why doesn't it get out?
Well, we come on this show every week, and every week we had referees on last week, Luke Pearce, their story and their narrative, badly told, ill-informed, not put out in the media. I've said on this, I've said this to you a million times, I have a massive issue, RFU, controlling players, panicking, worrying about the wrong stuff, getting the wrong message out. If this is true,
yeah.
and what you're saying is true, and there is fact, why is there always this reluctance just to be very open and honest and to come out and direct? Because the first thing, what the beauty of the world we live in now is that social media and the ability to say your piece is now better and more available than ever. You don't have to rely on papers. Like the papers have lost their power because you could easily come out and say, actually, point by point, this is inaccurate. But obviously Wayne Barnes has done it extremely well. But I wonder why yet again the RFU are behind the curveball on the ability to sell the narrative, do it properly and do it when they need to do it, as opposed to rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic.
I think that's a fair challenge, and I think we do need to do more of that now. I mean, this is why I welcome this opportunity here, because this is an unfiltered, get it all out there, discuss it. If I say anything and you want to fact check it, people can fact check it. Going through the traditional routes of media, not always easy. You don't get your message doesn't come out the way you want to come out. We've got something blowing around at the moment around we're paying Teneo £5,000 a day. Yeah. Well, that's complete nonsense, absolute nonsense. So we spoke to the journalist. I think it was on Friday. We were asked about, are you paying Freshfields $50,000 for a review of the LTIP scheme, the incentive scheme? Yes, because it was requested by council. We're doing that. And are you paying Teneo £5,000 a day? Well, no, we're not.
What are you paying?
We've worked with them previously. We've got a change of communications organisation, so our head of comms is leaving and someone new is coming in. So we're a bit light-handed and we wanted additional support. And we said through to the end of March, and we're paying a $30,000 fixed project fee. And you're going to say they're only going to work for 5 or 6 days.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to do.
but no, they've already done.
How many days are they working?
Well, it's open-ended.
Right.
So it's as much as we need. To do the things that we need to do between now and end of March. So
give or take 5 days a week.
5 days a week. So 20 hours a week.
But we said that very clearly, but it gets out there as being £5,000 a day, which gets really frustrating.
Can I just? We've had you on the show before. Can you just once again, for those who don't know, just confirm what your job spec is? Because there's lots being thrown out, particularly around Premiership clubs that have gone out of business. Will you just remind everyone what you are in charge of?
Yeah. First and foremost, we're a membership organisation, so we represent 1,600 clubs around the country. So you're looking after their interest, you're protecting their interest, you're investing into the community game. We'll get on to the finances in a minute. So you've got that piece, which is why you exist. You're protecting your membership. Hopefully you're developing your membership and the community game. There's that piece. You're a venue operator. So, you've got Twickenham, which is going to be an interesting exercise in 27 when we go into the refurbishment, big project to refurbish Twickenham. You're quite a complex commercial broadcast rights owner. The deal we did with Allianz was not an easy deal. The conversations we're having now with Six.
Why was that not an easy deal?
Well, because it's a big deal. It's not a very simple deal. It's a big deal. I mean, one of the main reasons we got it across the line is the money we're investing in digital now. So we've now got a 4 million database that we can talk to. You can create digital products and digital assets which carry a higher media value. So it wasn't just a walk. It's not about now having Allianz branding around the pitch. The world's moved on massively. There's a couple more we're going to announce fairly soon, which are really interesting, never done before type deals. They're complex deals.
And it's 100 million over 13 years.
I can't see. We don't disclose.
Why not? In the NFL, they would put that up in lights.
They don't want it disclosed.
Who don't?
Allianz don't want it disclosed.
Well, whisper into my ear and I'll disclose it.
But they don't.
But this is the problem. Is that this is one of your great success stories of the last 12 months, and no one knows very much about it, other than that Allianz is on the outside of Twickenham.
And everyone lost their plot over it because you for once called Allianz. That's what I mean. So badly Rugby does it. The only thing anyone cared about was Allianz Twickenham. You can't call it that. You can't call it that. To turn out you're doing data, products, the money's going back into the game, the amount of money.
But also,
it's a massively good deal.
But also that backfires on you because then it puts control in sorry for Allianz, but puts control back in the sponsor's hand because next time they can reduce it if you don't hit. Whereas if you actually put it out there and everyone knows where it starts, that's where the next conversation about any sponsorship deal starts.
But when you worked at Puma and Adidas, you must have had the ability to accidentally leave something in front of a journalist to leak it. If not, look at you could never do that. But I mean, coming out and saying the first thing we ever do is go, don't tell anyone, but tell everyone. Is the way if you've got a success story.
Yeah.
But they just as part of the contract, you're not allowed to say it as NDAs and all that nonsense.
Yeah. I can understand why they wouldn't want that to be disclosed.
It's reporting anyway, so people figure it out from the report.
No, we'll have our total sponsorship fees in there, but we won't break it out and say this is the nature of that deal. But it's probably the biggest deal in rugby, actually, thinking about it. I don't know how many other bigger ones, sponsorship deals are in rugby at the moment. But
Circa. Give or take.
But also more than that, they're a really, really good partner for us to have going into 27 because they've got 7 other stadiums around the world. They're very much concerned about fan experience. They've got great knowledge about how it works in Sydney and how it works in Turin and how it works wherever. And they want to get directly involved in terms of when we develop Twickenham the way we want to go, they've got good experience and knowledge about how to actually make that better. So they're a great partner to have.
Bill Beaumont, interim chair of the RFU, has called for unity in the game. Given the travelling you're doing, the conversations you're having, the headlines that are being written, how far away does unity feel right now at the RFU?
We've got a big job to do. And I think when we go on the road, the worst thing we can do is have an evening somewhere in Yorkshire and present for 3 hours. I think we've got to listen to what the grievances are.
What is everyone? What is the 1, 2, 3 of what's coming at you?
I think it's the things because this is primarily a community game conversation. So one of the things I hear a lot is we don't feel with the current governance structure of the RFU, we don't think we as clubs are getting the right representation, and we don't think our voice is heard correctly. And they always point the fingers at, or people point the fingers at, well, you've got Oxford, Cambridge, Army, Navy, Air Force, whatever.
Referees.
They're not really representing our needs. It gets tricky there because some of the council reps you get on from places like the Army and the Navy and Air Force are really, really good. So in terms of strategic input, in terms of knowing what they're doing, so you're getting real value from them. But I think the membership out there are saying, this is where it's not fit for purpose. How can you have 54 National League clubs if you've only got one rep on council? We're not getting the right views across. You're not hearing what we need to have. So I think there'll be a bit of that will come out. I think there'll be conversations about what are you doing to promote the game for more players to come and play. Even though we're actually having a pretty good season in terms of playing numbers, I think that will be a big one. I think it'll be RFU sits in an ivory tower and you don't talk to us and you're disconnected and you don't understand what our problems are. I'd say they're probably the 3. So we're going to have to listen to all that.
And we're going to come on to all of those. We're going to start with a clickbait, though, which is the bonus. I'm going to read something, then you're free to sort of dispel it as you see fit. But Bill Sweeney's bonus at the Rugby Football Union was part of a long-term incentive plan, otherwise known as an LTIP, established to retain senior executives during and after the COVID-19 pandemic. The plan was implemented following a voluntary salary reduction taken by the executive team during the pandemic. The LTIP was designed to reward executives upon achieving specific multi-year targets, and these were the targets you had to hit, 5 of them. Financial performance made up 60% of your bonus pot, tick, over a 3-year period. A blended win ratio of senior men's and women's team was 10% of your bonus pot, tick. Participation in community rugby for men was 10%, and you got a tick for that. And the 2 that you failed on, participation in community rugby for women and girls, which made up 10%, and rugby inclusivity, which made up 10%. Just very quickly, why did you fail on those 2?
The actual achievement, I think, on the women's game was 45,000 players, and I think our target was, 60.
Right.
Or it might have been less than that, actually. But why did we fail? Well, we were pushing it as hard as we could and we didn't hit the number. So that's something now, with the World Cup coming up this year, Women's World Cup, and the programmes we've got in place to leverage that, the working with government on the investment into creating a legacy after the Women's World Cup, we think we'll address that, but we missed the number. We missed the fifth one, was the inclusion and diversity. We missed that one. We missed it mainly on LGBTQ, I think, was the main miss on that. And that was a blended one across various different areas of inclusivity. And we just didn't hit the target. I think one of the things that affected us on inclusivity was the experience we went through on the gender participation topic. If you remember about transgender and how hot that is as a topic, and rightfully so, we took a stance which was we're not going to allow transgender athletes to play rugby. That, I think, alienated a lot of people who felt, how can you say you're inclusive but you're not including people here? So I think that probably had an effect in terms of that one. But we absolutely hit the finance one you've said. We hit the blended target on men's and women's, and we hit the men's participation.
We can get into the detail of the numbers and the LTIP and the reasons for it, etc. But can I just start with the optics of it, which is record loss, and you can explain it about that, I'm sure. 42 members of the RFU made redundant, and yet there is a big chunk of cash paid out to senior management. From an optics point of view, can you understand why there has been the reaction there has?
100%. And I knew it was going to be a major problem quite a way before it was done. If you didn't see that becoming an issue,
did you consider
didn't know about the redundancies?
Can you refuse to take your
charity?
So what we did, I wanted to defer it. So I said, why are we paying this in 23, 24? And I'll get onto the financial cycle and why that World Cup year is always a bad year. But why don't we defer it to 25, or why don't we defer it to 27? The problem is, once you've declared an incentive program like this, it's stated in your annual reports, and it was done previously, and you accrue for it year after year. And even if it had been paid later, it still has to be announced, and it still has to be taken in that year. So that wouldn't have changed the year it was taken. To your point, I should talk about how it was set up. So cast your mind back to those horrible days of COVID, and everyone worked crazy hours. And I remember March 20th in 2020. And that day we set up 9 different working groups. The whole of the game worked incredibly hard. You lose 60% of your staff on furlough, and you've got to get this other stuff going on. We were lobbying government really hard for money. And if you remember, they had that sports winter survival fund, 350 odd million. I think we got 140. So we
got the most of any sport.
We had
right,
a disproportionate amount came to us. And we got criticised, or government got criticised at the time, for protecting a posh white sport as opposed to whatever. So, but that was a recognition by government that one of the great assets of rugby is that rugby clubs own their own assets and are at the heart of the community, and therefore that was an investment into the community. So that took an awful lot of work to do. It wasn't just us that did a good job through COVID. I mean, all the volunteers did a brilliant job, and I don't think we lost a club through COVID in the community game. So as we were coming towards the end of that, I don't want to touch another point you just mentioned there, but as we're coming towards the end of that, we knew that the harder task wasn't necessarily surviving through COVID. It was the post-COVID challenge, because you've got clubs coming back, your costs are coming back up, revenue generation was harder, sponsors were nervous about what was going to happen, so it was harder to drive your revenue side. So we knew that the COVID recovery plan was going to be very difficult to implement. The board and the remuneration committee wanted to retain myself and the executive team through that next cycle, through the end of 23-24. At the time, I don't know if you remember as well, but it was called the Great Move at the time. People were leaving their jobs, changing. Senior executives are well in demand. People just opting out of commercial life and business life. They thought, different lifestyle. There was a real concern from the board that there was the chance of losing some senior executives, and in particular, probably Sue Day, CFO, highly talented. Simon Massey-Taylor, obviously, gone to PRL. So they wanted to lock them in to deliver the COVID recovery plan, and that was the intention of it. There was never a conversation. We took a voluntary pay cut at the beginning of COVID of 20%, and we forwent our bonus, said we won't take a bonus. The following year, the bonus was reduced to 50%. Eddie jumped on immediately and said, no, I'll do 20% as well. So we took our voluntary pay cuts. There was never a conversation that this LTIP was some form of compensation for salary sacrifice. It was never raised, never mentioned. That came... Well, it didn't really come. It was never a conversation in terms of we're going to give you this LTIP to make up for voluntary payments. I think you asked the question, is it a bad optic? I've worked in both commercial, corporate and sport, and I've been the beneficiary of a LTIPs before. There was one at Adidas. It's very, very different working in corporate than in sport. I mean, sport is about emotion. It's about, how do you go to a club and you're arguing about, or not arguing, discussing travel funding at 250 quid, and then I've got this bonus. So it's one thing to be able to live and work with an LTIP in the corporate world. It's very difficult in the sports world. But this was seen as an exceptional circumstance, which obviously it was. I can't imagine it will be repeated ever unless we have another COVID. And the board felt and by and large, it actually delivered what it needed to deliver.
But when you saw it was coming, and you know that there is that much emotion attached to it, I mean, we were discussing, I mean, the money that you were paid as a bonus would run a PWR team for a season, I presume. I mean, I'm making it up, but it's not far off. If you knew it was coming and you know how much emotion is attached to it, how difficult was the decision to say, yes, I'm going to take this?
No, it's a contracted commitment. So the board has come and said, right, for us to get through this next 3 years.
But you can charity it or you can leave it, I presume. I mean, you don't have to take it.
No, you don't have to take it. I mean, it's contractually available. If the RFU chose not to pay it, then it's contractually promised to you. Now, I make my own payments to charity, but I consider them to be personal. So I think using that or giving it all to charity as a justification for why you've accepted the LTIP, I'm not sure that's the right message to.
I understand.
I think it falls into the fact that when you obviously it was only 10% of your bonus, but then you look at you using the girls' results to boys sat at, because something else in the report was it was down as 65% men win rate, but it really was 58 because for some reason the New Zealand games weren't counted. Is that in the report?
Well, you count that your win ratio starts after the end of June. For each year is measured after the end of June.
So those two go into the next year.
Yeah, so it goes into...
Okay. But then obviously with the girls winning 97% of their... Is it right to blend those results into one? Because obviously in the bigger piece of what the revenue and the finances, which I'm sure we'll come on to, the girls obviously don't play at the moment, don't play a massive role within that part. So is it right just to then use their results on a team that were ahead of everyone else at the moment in terms of their journey?
I think one thing I need to make clear as well, I didn't make it clear at the beginning though, but we didn't request an LTIP. It was never requested from myself and the exec. We had no say in the quantum of it. We had no say in what the amount should be.
And it's absolutely worth saying that people, big people in big roles get well paid. The challenge I think you've got, funnily enough, I think if you remove this LTIP bonus from everything that's being thrown at you at the moment, you are in a totally different position. Yeah. It is the LTIP bonus that has got people absolutely fuming. It's the 42 redundancies that happened in a simultaneous fashion. That I think is almost the catalyst for everything that you're going through right now.
Yeah. No, I can understand that, which is why I said we wanted to defer it, or I wanted to defer it to end of 25 or 27. The redundancies are 27, but having said that, every one of those is a tragedy. So I'm not belittling it being at 27.
So can I just take one step back? So to go back to the record loss for the year, that also is something that's being thrown into that you taking a big bonus at the point the RFU is taking. Can you put the context on that? I mean, Will Green was saying that £36 million loss recorded, but you were forecasting a 42. I have the numbers muddled, but give me the detail of the record loss.
To start off, it's really important to understand the financial model of the RFU. So our financial year goes from the 1st of July to the end of June. So it's not a calendar year, it's a July to June year. And we manage our finances and we manage the business on a 4-year cycle because of the impact of the Rugby World Cup. So if we take 23, 24, and each one of those years, we invest consistently just under 100 million into the game. Consistently, because you can't vary your investment into the game. That has to remain consistent. So we invest just under 100 million into the game, and roughly it breaks down a third to the community, a third to the professional game, which is primarily obviously PRL and a bit the championship, and a third goes to the England teams, men's, women's, pathways, unders, etc., etc. So that's invested consistently every single year. When you get into a year, and let's take 23-24, the first year of that cycle would have been 2020-21. So in that first year, you play 3 Six Nations at home, you play 4 autumn internationals, and you make your most money there. So having spent 100, roughly pre-COVID, having spent your 100, you make about 12 million quid first year. Second year, you've got 2 Six Nations at home, you've got 3 autumn internationals, so you break even. Year 3 is the same as year 1. You've got your 3 6, so you make 12. Year 4, you've got 2 Six Nations, you've got no autumn internationals, which are our biggest money spinner, and you've got the increased cost of going to a Rugby World Cup. So you always lose. You lose all the money you made in year 1 and year 3, and that's how we budget it and plan it. So every 4th year, every World Cup year, you make a big, big loss. In 2019, for Japan, we
Is
lost...
that not something that should be written into the World Cup, though, that you get your 12 million?
I was actually asking for a bit more than that. But,
Well, you know what I mean.
That's why you've got an LTIP bonus, you idiot.
Let me finish this one
you
off.
know what I'm trying to say,
I'll come on to that if you like, because this is something that a number of us and unions are pushing about. So just to finish this one off, because it's important. So if you go to 2019, when we had the World Cup in Japan, we lost 27 million that year. Now, you'd normally lose 24. We lost 27 because it was just the start of COVID, and that was a 3 million extra hit. So that was a 27 million loss there. The real loss for 23-24 this year, last year, that's caused the issue, the real loss is 34 million.
Right.
So the difference in the 34 and this 44 number is the money that we've taken from CVC to invest in the growth of the game. So the growth of digital, the growth of the women's and girls game, the investment into the stadium master plan planning, that 10 million is that money. It's not us making a loss on revenue in and cost out, because that gets added into the P&L line. So we lost...
So that's a one-off cost, is it?
No, because we're going to repeat that, because we're going to continue to invest every year 100 million in the next cycle, and we've got more money from the CVC deal that we're continuing to invest in the women's game, digital, which is now delivering returns. So go back to that 34 million, 19, 27, 23 World Cup year France, 34, it's a 7 million gap. So of that 7 million gap, 2.5 million was increase in utilities. Twickenham utilities went from 2.5 million to 7 million and then back down to 5. So it's 2.5 million additional utilities, which we're all facing around the country. Because of the concussion, head injury issue, insurance has gone doubled. So and we
From
pay
what to what?
2 to 4. So we pay £4 million a year for all community clubs' insurance cover. So that doubles, that's 2 there. And the other 2 million was business rates, which have also skyrocketed. So 2.5, roughly it's that 7 million gap. We've plugged that gap now with a combination of things, the redundancy program to reduce cost. But it wasn't just about laying people off for cost. We've got a different skill set required now in the RFU to be a contemporary, modern game or commercial entity. You need people in there with real specialist digital skills to do that. We've had to change the nature and the structure of the company. You'd probably want us to do more in marketing in terms of how we've got to get in and do that. So you get to the end of 2019. I came in 2019, May 2019. Coming into that next cycle, we had 0.7 million pounds of reserves. We had 79 million pounds of debt in 2019. As we sit here today, we've got 0 debt, we've got 59 million pounds of cash, we've got 80 million pounds worth of reserves. We've plugged that gap in that operating P&L that I mentioned, that 7 million, and our revenues for this cycle going through will be, I reckon, about 20% higher than the previous cycle. If you look at our financials, it's one of the things I'm most proud of. And you're going to go about the communications piece again. Well, why isn't it out there? Well, we have tried to tell people it's out there. Some people, it's not a great story in some ways. So
But I think in rugby right now, we're crying out for any successful
Well, I know,
financial
but
stories. There are
what's
people
interesting,
waiting for good news around the numbers.
I was just going to say that I know I didn't interrupt you because there are questions and I want you to finish. But when you sit here, and obviously, like I said, one of the things about when doing the show was how informed you were about the different subjects. And obviously, I read Wayne, read the brief, read all the bits and pieces. But it is quite nuanced, particularly in business and finance, the way things are set up. And you've talked about the LTIP. And the fact is that when I signed contracts with WAS or whatever, bonus structures were put in place that were either agreed by the club, and that was a uniform one they went, or my agent would come in and go, I would like this to be put in. And they would go, give you that, we won't give you that. And you sometimes know it's coming along. But it's interesting, a lot of stuff I've talked about was completely at odds with everything we'd heard. Oh, I don't know if I'm, did you know?
No, I agree. I think perception is 9/10 of the law. We can keep saying it. And I think you are losing the battle.
Yeah,
because I want you to finish, but we said about kind of the bonus thing, we were just talking about it offline, because it's always difficult because you always see this with all the like banks and all the bits and pieces. And like you said, it's more palatable in corporate world where, you see someone getting fired and sacked or whatever, and they get an enormous bonus, but that was factored in there, and very few people turn it down. I was trying to think about my kind of own personal moral compass. If I'd worked and it was contractual and it was there, how I would have handled the PR slightly differently, because I would have known, like you said, he would have known.
You'd
it was
have ranted
coming.
and raved on Instagram.
I would have
and Jeff.
I would have just gone, look, this is the real sticking point. This is awful. But whenever you talk about money in the context of the average person in the street, everyone's in financial dire situations. It's very difficult. When you look at people's perceptions of what a normal salary is, say it's 24 grand a year as a base salary, and you start looking at what other people earn, it's a very contentious topic. You're never going to win, and sometimes you want to pick the battles. But I was like, I asked Hins, what would you do? He said he wouldn't have taken it. I said I would 100% taken it, because I don't know that's what you do. You're employed to do a job, and if the landscape isn't as clear as it should be, or the structure's been put in place, like you said, and you've offered to defer, you've done these things again, I'd come out and have said this and said that I would, that's what I would have done, because I don't. We assume you would have taken it.
Well, absolutely. I haven't got any money, so every penny I can get, I need.
I wanted to ask. We talked about Tom. So the listeners, how many of you think you would turn down a bonus? I don't fundamentally believe.
Can I just finish off on the finances then?
Yeah.
Because it's a big topic. So, whatever goes on, I will always look at this period as probably one of my greatest achievements is the finances of the RFU, and a similar thing happened at the BOA, but it's not positioned that way at the moment. But the financial strength that we're in at the moment means we can guarantee, and we have done, guaranteed 30 million investment into the community game for the next 4 years. That's never been done before. It was always variable. There's always whatever's left in the pot maybe type approach. But we've guaranteed 30 million into the community game over the next 4 years.
When you say community game, break that down for us. Where's that
Every
going?
club that's not professional.
Right.
So all the money on insurance.
1,600 clubs.
Yeah, the 1,600 clubs. So the money we provide. But also bear in mind, there's a bit of a myth that the RFU funds community clubs to survive. Our contribution to community clubs is about between 8 and 10% of their revenue. They drive most of their revenue through subscriptions, through bar, through whatever they do. So our cash that goes to them is probably about 8%, but we fund all the insurance. There's other issues that we cover there, coach development. And the other one I haven't touched on is when I first came in 2019, the biggest surprise that I had in 2019, particularly coming out of Team GB, was we didn't have a performance pathway. Dean Ryan was leaving at the time. We'd had a very bad financial year 2017-18, where we lost £31 million in 2017-18, and that was a break-even year.
Why was that?
Because, okay, we're getting a lot of
dry... Is that stadium?
No, getting to a lot of dry detail about finances here, but we had a 26 million benefit from the World Cup in 2015. So that was a great windfall.
Well done, James, for playing a part in that.
Yeah, great windfall.
You're welcome.
We then also had the bumper Sky deal for the autumns. Cracking broadcast.
Those are the days, weren't
those
they?
are the days.
When you used to be employed, didn't you?
Massive, big deal that came in. So the RFU was flush with money, and that's when you had the investment in things like the AGP, the all-weather pitches. You had investment going out.
Was that all schools?
Yeah. Well, they had that as well. So it was a bit of a spending spree, which resulted in a big, big loss in 2017-18. 31 million in a year, by the way, where you're expecting to, or you'd have to break even for the 4-year cycle. So then the restrictions came on in terms of reducing cost. And the decision was taken then to cut back on the pathways. You don't see the effect of the pathways until 5 or 6 years later. So
I can tell you in the brief that we're going to come on to that, because there's strong feeling around where the pathways lie. Sorry, you finished, but you're absolutely right. There's strong feeling around the funding of those.
Okay, so we've got no performance pathways. Dean Ryan's going out. He was quite aggressive, I think, at the time in the media about no point me doing this job. There's no funding. There's nothing going on. So he left. My first recruitment in was Conor O'Shea, and Conor's bread and butter is building performance pathways. He did it at the current Italian team, not a bad side, I reckon. He was the one that did that 5-6 years ago, and you're seeing the outcome of that now. So Conor was the first recruit in. We had no under-18s, under-20 skills coaches. We had no specialist coaches there. We had no head of those teams in there at all, so we brought those in. We had no England A, which is a really important topic in terms of, we can get onto this in a minute as well, cohesion, because that helps you build cohesion when your under-18s have come through in your 20s. So Conor's been building those pathways now for the last 5.5 years. We thought we'd win a under-20s Junior World Cup this year. We won it last year, so a year earlier. The under-20s coming through now behind them, he feels very strongly is better and stronger, but the under-18s, again, he feels are really strong, like a generational squad of players coming through. You're seeing some of the players coming through now with Afo, Asher, Oscar Beard coming,
Pollock,
a load of them, Pollock.
2 years ago.
So you're seeing those ones starting to come through now. So we feel pretty comfortable that pipeline of England talent is going to safeguard the men's senior team for some considerable years, and we can continue to invest in it because we're in a financially strong position. So there's a lot of really good things happening, but we're not. Okay, it's not getting out there.
Well, the challenge, though, around the pathways that you have built is that they have come through schools, academies, universities, Premiership, A teams, etc., at the expense of what the grassroots would say is kids playing on a week-to-week basis for their club. And when I'm jumping around a bit here, but when you the accusation is that the pathways that are in place now, which are delivering, but they have removed growth in state schools, they have removed growth in grassroots clubs which feel cut adrift, and that is making rugby a more elite sport, because in order to make it to the top now, you've probably got to be playing at a private school, which is 6% of the educational population, as we know, and therefore rugby is in danger of becoming more elitist, not a sport for all.
So I don't think that's the case. I really don't think...
The argument would be if you're failing on the inclusivity element, there is, you can build a case for that.
But I don't think that's the reason. So
it's very wide-ranging.
For sure it is.
I really don't...
But that would be the accusation from the grassroots clubs.
So you say when you go around the country and about the things that are going to be lightning rods when we stand up there and listen to what's to be said, I've missed one off. One will be this. So whenever I go to a community club, they'll say... we lose the young players to the DPP, the developing player pathway. They go into the DPP, they don't make it. It's a really low success rate. And then they lost the game forever because they had high expectations. They don't come back to the club. They just leave the game. That's a problem. It's a difficult problem to solve. I think part of it is expectation management. So the moment you get onto a DPP pathway or going into academy of a club, you get your dosh, you got all your kit branded up, and parents think it's going to be the next England success. So expectations are difficult. I think we've got to do a better job with the Premiership clubs in terms of making sure that those players, if they don't make it, have got fallback to keep them in the game. So I don't believe this current pathway and all the work that's going into it is creating an issue in terms of players. The clubs say, if you're not being picked for your academy in a weekend, can you please have them back at the community club? And that's something we've got to work on.
Can you just talk to me? So 2020, COVID as the factor, RFU gutted the community coaches and rugby development officers. And in doing so, it appeared to give up on rugby in state schools. Yeah. How are you going to get the grassroots element comfortable again and excited by the support that you are giving them through this area?
As part of this governance review that's going on at the moment, there's and we're a long way off it. We're a long way off finalising it. But one of the considerations in there, which personally I support, I think it's great, is to go to more of a regionalised operation, a bit like New Zealand. So they have their regions, they have their provinces there. So if we were to divide the country up into X number of regions, let's say 6 or 7, then I would see our role as being, right, our job is to provide you with this 30 million funding that you break out by the various different regions. Now, what are your priorities in your region? What are the things you want to do? Are you driving the women's game? Are you driving RDOs? Are you driving something else? But that's your fixed budget to operate within that. We agree the targets up front. We set measurement criteria and you evaluate it at the end of the year. And then you devolve a lot of the accountability and responsibility down to people who are in the game at the local level. That's how I see the solution to that. Because if you're going to spend more money on whatever it is, it has to come at the expense of something else. So we need the game to prioritise it. And this goes back to where I think they don't feel necessarily well represented within the RFU in terms of their voice being heard on the areas they want to focus and prioritise investment.
What is the number one problem, whether that's participation from a 17 to professional or into even, because I would say when kids go to uni, the biggest problem is for clubs is getting them back. Yeah. And they just lose their player base. They might never come back because uni is uni and everything.
I think I'm not trying to fudge the question a bit. I think I wouldn't call it the number one problem because it's a case of how do you prioritise which areas you focus on, and I wouldn't rank it. That's problem number one. That's problem number two. There's lots of areas we need to address. I think the number one problem for the game is I don't think we're attracting young people into the game as much as we should be.
Why?
I don't think it's presented in a appealing enough fashion. I don't think if you look at other sports and you're competing with other sports. I was down for the 2 tests in New Zealand, and you watch how rugby league is promoted in New Zealand. And they've got Warriors there now in Auckland. There's maybe another team coming up in Christchurch. Just the energy around it and the information around it and how it's packaged and the colour and the noise and everything, it just resonates and connects with players. And I think, things like, one of the things you want to do with the Nations Cup is really treat the Nations Cup differently. Roll the dice on a few things with Nations Cup, because we don't have to. Six Nations is jewel in the crown. You fiddle with that at your peril. But the beauty, and we are in full agreement with the Southern Hemisphere on this, is we've now got matches which broadcasters and people before said are meaningless. Well, talk to you about an autumn international being meaningless. Not meaningless, but when you've got a tournament like this now, how you can package it differently. And there's many examples how you can do it. I think we've just got to really connect with the younger fan.
I only splutter because I'm not sure, with the greatest respect, that this is doing much for our Gen Z audience, although I'm very interested in where we're going with all of this. And that is a really interesting segue from we've got to do more to engage the younger audience. When you are charging, you tell me, £200, £300, £400 a ticket, and we were at Twickenham, we host a room at Twickenham. It is packed with people in shuffle gilets, some of whom don't even bother going out for the game. Everybody gets very pissed. It is not a kid-friendly environment at Twickenham. You're not going to dispute that. How on earth do you get the people who are 8, 9, 10, 15, 16, 17, who will come and scream, shout with the foam hands? They want autographs and selfies. They can't get a ticket to the game. So
it's difficult because of the way the RFU is structured. So if you take all of our tickets on a match day, because of the constitution of the RFU, 51% of those tickets are given to the clubs or sold to the clubs at a discounted amount. 51%. And the clubs can then either just buy them and their own members can go, or they can provide them to sponsors and commercial partners as incentivization to sponsor the club. So 51% is already locked off. You've got 15,000 seats at Twickenham, which are debenture seats. So that's 20% of the stadium. So you're at 71% now. You've got 15% are commercial partners, 86%. You've got 10% is visiting team, 96%. You've got virtually zero you can go to the open market on.
None of whom are going to schools,
so
kids' academies,
Well, what we do now, we're holding back some of these tickets and saying we want to try and promote a younger audience. But you still, when you go through all of those categories...
But you're doing that with 60 seats in the North Stand, aren't you? I mean,
that's a bit more than that.
Well, but I mean, we're not changing, we're not ripping up the rule book and starting again here.
It's difficult for me to rip up the rule book on the ticketing policy there.
Could you? Why is your job at the top? You can't rip it up. Why can't you? Would you have to get some sort of mad?
Too many boards.
Could you ever get the turkeys around the table and say Christmas is not working for anybody here? We need to restructure this.
It could do, but I'd put that into the basket. What I've just said here about governance review of the RFU and how the structure of the RFU needs to be changed to be fit for purpose. So you'd have to get council around the table. Because at the moment, as I said before, we're a membership organisation. We're there to support the needs of the membership. And the membership at the moment get 51% of those tickets. So you'd have to sit around the table and say, are we getting a young enough crowd in here? How do we incentivize?
They're all over 80.
And they all want the freebies.
Yeah. How do you incentivize? How do we get to a situation where we're bringing in a different audience into the ground? It's obviously something we'd all like to see. But you've still got the things that are quite difficult to challenge.
Has anybody ever proposed we need a proper discussion around the way of the game?
We've discussed it. We've talked about it. We haven't put a proposal on the table.
Because I wonder if...
Is that something that is...
Possibly.
I go back to Wayne Barnes' post this morning, which is a very good one. And it sort of stopped me in my tracks because what he was essentially saying is the referees have called an SGM to remove the CEO of the RFU based on what they've been told from the championship clubs regarding promotion and relegation. In 2025, when Dana White is single-handedly running UFC into a multi-billion-dollar deal and the Premier League is taking over the world and every kid is online gaming 24/7, I cannot get my head around that as an entity. Well, I can, and I'm sort of gobsmacked by it. Is that a no comment?
It's not a no comment. I'm not sure. You'd have to tear up completely.
That's what I mean.
You would.
Yeah.
Shall we?
Yeah. That's why I mean, maybe
this is a round table.
I think rugby's in danger of somebody coming along and creating something completely different that does all the things that it should be doing. Like, for example, the UFC, where characters are characters, it's controversial, it's popular, it's got video games, it's got everything off the back of it, the content shows, they show knockouts, they show everything that rugby's panicking about showing, and the TV rights. The reason we love rugby league is razzmatazz, bright lights, massive hits, big occasions, physicality, fights. The rugby league, especially at NRL, are lunatics, off-field stuff. It's not ideal, but it all goes into
Can I just add to that? So I'm reading from the EPS commercial guidelines, players, agents and personal sponsors. We are talking about the best players in this country. And on page 3, at all times, there can be no promotion of personal sponsors, no content in England kit, no content at England rugby venues.
Is that the current one or the previous
October
one?
24.
So is that the new PGP one? Because
apparently so.
Well, we've relaxed a lot the ability to.
If we're
to
trying to make stars in the
anything
game
before.
Yeah.
I got
no content with
was-
3 or more England players together.
no, I think that's the old one. I think we've
Okay,
changed.
well, it
that.
says October 24 on it.
Okay.
But that's what.
But to answer the other one there, so Dana White. Okay, well, UFC doesn't have a community game.
No,
So-
sure.
so
but
you've
it's,
got
to- I know
it-
American
but it's
sport
one man
does,
making
does it?
decisions. I mean, it's a multi-billion-dollar
Yeah,
business.
Yeah, NFL. But
Yeah.
the NFL doesn't have a community game.
No.
Which comes back to the original question, which is the RFU fit for purpose? If you are running the elite game and the
And
community
the-
game,
can you do
are
both?
and this isn't. I'm frustrated as a person who loves the game that we have seen the RFU implode. What am I? 44. I've seen it 4 or 5 times, and we're back at the same freaking destination once again. It doesn't really matter who sits in the CEO chair. This seems to come round time and time and time again, and everybody in the council gets another decade older. The kids aren't watching.
Well, yeah, we are into. I mean, so I don't know if you know this, but I was offered the job in 2017, and I turned it down. So I had the weekend to think about it, turned it down. And there were 3 main reasons why I turned it down. One was we were on the way to Tokyo 2020 at the time with Team GB, and this was 2017. And you're not finished with your preparation for an Olympics until about a year out from the games. So there was still a lot of work to do. I'd lived in Japan, I had good contacts, I spoke a bit of Japanese. I still thought I had value to add to that. So in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I'm dropping Team GB in it here if I leave. That was one issue. Second issue was I did have prior sight of the RFU figures, and I thought it was going to be a horrendous 2017-18, which it turned out to be. And I wanted a bit of safety net on that, and they said, no, is what it is, fine. And the third one was, over the weekend, I got a call from an ex-minister, an ex-sports minister, followed up very quickly by 2 or 3 other very prominent people in the world of British sport. And they said, don't go to the RFU. It continually implodes. You're gonna run massive reputational risk by going there. You can almost set your clock by it. It's some kind of
5.5 years, is it?
Yeah. So I didn't take it, and then the previous CEO lost his job because of 17-18 finances. I'd been kicking myself because I do love this game and I wanted to do it. It was the only job that I'd have left the BOA for. So I went back for it in 2019, asked them first, do I go for it? They said, you can go for it. You've got to go through the whole system, whole recruitment system with a different recruitment agency as well. And then I got it. But I wrote a letter to myself on that. I'll show it to you one day if you like. So I wrote a letter to myself saying, you're going into this with eyes wide open. There's a very good chance there'll be another implosion junior call. I'll show it to you. But yeah, it does continue.
But as long as you got your bonus in structure, you're all right.
And the political impact.
Get the bonus before they come for you.
But what you're asking for is complete revolution. You're talking about completely.
I don't think we're the only one.
No.
And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think the game is at the point where revolution, otherwise it's last rites.
Because,
I mean, of course, there's some good news stories in there, but it's all very sort of little bits here and little bits there, and
You'd have to tear up the whole constitution of the RFU. You'd
We'll
have
help.
to.
We're there.
Okay.
We're ready to
We'll do
go.
it.
All right.
So I
Okay.
wonder because we've said this before, and actually listening to what you said about the importance of grassroots clubs, and I played at Maidenhead Rugby Club from 5 to 17.
Brilliant club.
I went through all that club. I did the school stuff, and I used to play for Maidenhead on a Sunday, Wellington on a Saturday, go off and do all the Tuesday night, Thursday night training sessions. I did all that, and I went through it. But I've always been a big believer they are 2 completely separate entities, and any organisation that tries to mould an elite professional entertainment business with a grassroots amateur characters, not professional, based on years of tradition, it's never going to merge. And the reason I asked the question was, as somebody coming into business, it seems like you're doing the best job that you can at your disposal. But if I was to honestly ask you, and I give you a magic wand, what would you do? It sounds like to me you would split them, you would manage them, you would do it, and you would do it in a completely different way. I don't put words in your mouth, but that's what you would do, because it sort of seems like as soon as you look under the hood of rugby and RFU, you go, would I design a structure like that to serve the game at the moment? The answer is categorically no, I'd say.
And I would second that. And I'm not sort of justifying or backing up here. I don't think it matters who is CEO of the RFU. The gripes that are on this piece of paper are almost so you can put someone else in there, but is that going to solve how much money is going to the grassroots clubs, etc.? I'm conscious of time, and there are a few things I want to sort of fly through as sort of headlines. So governance. In 2022, English rugby chiefs were accused by MPs of overseeing a failure on an epic scale. The committee chairman, Julian Knight
Coming
MP,
from politicians.
accused Sweeney of being asleep on the job. I know we've touched on this actually in a previous show with you. You have said that there is now a system in place which has solved the challenges that you were hauled over the coals for in 2022. Is that fair?
So Julian Knight, interesting character. But when I went before that DCMS committee, I had no authority. RFU not involved in terms of the financial management of the PRL clubs. What we've done now with the PGP, and which is now the Professional Rugby Board, is introduce a system which is quite similar to the French one, the DNAC system there, where you've got to prove, you can't just say, I've got a sponsorship, you've got to prove it, you've got to back up documentation. If a club owner is putting money in, it has to come with a guarantee. So you can get some assurances that a club is financially viable and sustainable for the
entirety of the season.
For the entirety of the season. That's the FMP, which is independently chaired. It was Boardman. I think his name is Boardman. It's now a new one, I think. We're in the process of recruiting for that, a new person to run that. So you've got much more transparency now about what clubs, how clubs are from a financial perspective. Now, does that solve the problem of a club that might be struggling? It doesn't solve the problem of a club that might be struggling. We've got to find ways to help them get through that period.
Are all 10 Premiership clubs flashing green on the financial health dashboard at the moment?
I'm not ducking it, but I think you've got to talk to Simon on that one. I mean, that's a PRL
But presumably
topic.
RFU you have a piece of the pie in terms of...
Yeah, we understand. I wouldn't say they're all flashing green, but I wouldn't say they're all flashing red either.
Right. Newcastle is the one that...
That's
everyone will
up
be
for
most
sale.
Yes.
So that's on.
Is that because of the new process that's been put in place, or is that just a decision for Seymour Curdy?
I think Seymour's made a decision on what he wants to do with where he invests his money and where he goes.
Do you know, just from your position, whether that sale is progressing, the money's coming in? I know Steve Timers spoke positively.
I know talks are going on, but I don't know the details of who's coming in.
We're bouncing around a little bit. Community game tackle height. 2 years ago, the RFU's handling of the tackle height law attracted huge backlash with a call for Sweeney to resign. This was the first of the attempted SGMs.
Yeah.
The Community Clubs Union in 2023, and I'm quoting, Bill Sweeney has shown he's no friend of the community game and has seriously undervalued the strength of the community game. We will push for his resignation or removal via the SGM. Fair play. The trapdoor doesn't open, does it? You've done well with that. With hindsight, was that an absolute balls up? How did you get that wrong? How do you reflect on the tackle height?
Let me
law?
go through tackle height. So obviously we work with World Rugby a lot, and this has been going on the research has been going on for 7 years in terms of the effect of reducing the tackle height. You'd had the French had already gone to the waist, mainly because of the 3 deaths that occurred in France. And we were talking to them on a regular basis, and they were saying they were actually attributing the reduction in the tackle height to a resurgence of the community game. It's more exciting, there's more offloads, there's more tries scored, people feel safer. So that was the French experience. We were talking to New Zealand, who'd also had the Otago study, and they went a season before us, and were reporting similar things in terms of this is good, it's working very well. We had all the data from World Rugby in terms of incontrovertible medical evidence in terms of what do you do if you lower the tackle height. If you've got the tackle height higher, you've got a higher percentage probability of 2 heads in the same space, and you've got a much higher probability of concussions. So all the data led to saying, do this. Now, again, go back to structures, and you said tear it all up, but that's a regulatory change. So that comes under the power of RFU Council. They determine whether it goes down or not. I've actually got with me, I'll show it to you at the end before I go, I'll show you the original council paper that went to council about lowering the tackle height. And it was based on all the evidence we had, it was requesting that the game community game reduce the tackle height. That was agreed, unanimously agreed, no problem with that. It then became a communications by committee day. There was stuff coming
very un-rugby.
Left, right and centre. Our poor communications director, and she because it was a council a regulatory decision, they wanted to have final say on whatever went out. We'd never stipulated to what level. The next stage was supposed to be, right, reduce the tackle height. Next stage was figure out, talking to the game, where does it go to? Is it top of sternum? Is it below sternum? Is it stomach, belly button height? What is it? We hadn't decided what the tackle height level was to be at that stage. And then somebody within the council, at the very last minute, inserted the word waist and below. And with all the pandemonium that's going on that day in terms of communication, this thing goes out and it's waste. And that's what created the absolute furore.
Shit show, I think.
Yeah. So I don't know if that's an excuse or an explanation, but that's actually what happened.
But it's the same. It's the same PR thing. It's the same thing again.
Why did you not come out 6 minutes later and say, I'm really sorry, we've gone rogue on the press release. Everybody calm down. We're going to come back to you.
It's a council of a load of guys that are social media
in shows with people calling in, spitting fat, and you've just taken the punches.
I went around the country.
Don't go around the country. Get a fucking press release out.
In 6 minutes. We didn't know.
It's 2025. There is digital media, there's social media, there's news channels.
We didn't even know.
That's where the new board's
we didn't know it was
coming in,
wasting below at that stage.
Right.
We didn't even know it's
so who's proofreading
below
these things? I mean, like, you've got to move faster.
Is it because again, I was confused when you say, because obviously the council is different from the board.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Because and obviously. So the council of people are trying to remove you, right? And I would say,
despite the fact that they're the ones.
That's what I mean. But lots of the problems seem to stem from that.
The council.
Didn't someone else call them 57
But listen, truthfully, I know. Look, the point is they're trying to get rid of you anyway. I know you quite fancy keeping your job, so we don't go too hard. But let's be honest. The impression I get.
It's not about me keeping my job. Seriously.
Oh, fine. Well, let's fuck them then.
How much does it cost to keep the council?
Are they competent? Are they fit?
That's a good question. That's a good question. What does it cost?
Because I was going to ask you about that.
What does it cost to keep the council in steak and red wine at Twickenham?
Can I just say
with their plus one?
Can I just say something about council? So, I was going to say it's a bit like cholesterol, but it's there are some council members who are absolutely brilliant. And I'd say the majority of council members add a lot of value. Yep. They do understand their clubs. They do understand their areas. They bring a lot of expertise in. They're the eyes and ears of the RFU. They feed back into the RFU, and the RFU feeds back information through them out into the game. That's not all councillors. So there's parts of council which are particularly difficult. And there's a bit of that going on in terms of the current situation. So I wouldn't throw all of council under the bus.
Streamline it. Yeah. Can you answer Mike's question?
Thing I said
what is the annual bill for keeping council happy? Give me a rough guesstimate.
It's way more than your bonus.
Truthfully, is it more than
I was going to ask that.
57 members with plus one.
Yeah. 62 now.
62.
Good. We're
plus
on the
one.
Good. Because what we need is more.
Yeah.
Let's grow the council
as well, because it all comes to all the age group stuff. When I was doing under 19s, 21s, it all turned up wives, partners, hotels, travel, food, red wine. Love a fucking meeting, blazers, right? That's good. You got any idea what that would be?
Honestly, I don't know the number. I honestly don't know the number.
Is it more than your bonus?
A rumour it was over 1.5 million.
1.5 million.
But I honestly don't know the number. I can get the number.
I think we should get that out.
Well,
because that would be
higher or lower than 1.5 million?
I honestly don't know.
Yeah, but you can say higher or lower.
No, I don't know. I don't know what it is.
You've got the P&L.
I don't know. I have.
You sign off the numbers.
We don't break it out as a line item in terms of.
You should do.
Yeah, but so what you're saying? Would you check? So some of them fit for purpose, some of them aren't fit for purpose, some of them add value, some of them don't. Is it a hindrance to the development of the game, the way they operate at the moment, and are things like tackle height and the way that they handle the PR and the infighting counterproductive to the way you're trying to operate?
I think we need a new governance structure in terms of how you get the best out of them, and I think a lot of clubs would say the same thing.
Premiership 2. Again, a lot of negative press around the restructuring of the Championship. I'm reading a quote here that the Championship clubs have said the plans for Premiership 2 would turn the league into a zombie division. This was, I think, mid of last year. Alistair Bowe, Vice Chairman of the Championship Club, said in January last year, it gets extremely frustrating, especially when the Chief Executive will sit there and spend the whole time on his phone. We're doing our utmost to engage, but it's very difficult when you've got some people who obviously don't want to engage. The tender process took place in September last year. 2024 for applications to. Are we calling it Premiership 2?
Yeah.
Return of the Premiership.
It's Championship.
At the moment, it's still
Championship.
Yeah.
Where are we with what sits below the Premiership? Promotion and relegation. Who is going to be in it? And is everybody fuming, infighting, or beginning to settle and get organised and get ready?
It's almost the subject of a completely separate and independent. The good, the bad, and the rugby. Seriously, I mean, we've had more meetings in the last 2 years with the Championship than I think we've almost had with the Premiership, even with doing the PGP. I mean, we want a very strong Tier 2. You want a strong Tier 2. You want it for all sorts of different reasons. Player development, nationwide geographical expansion of the league, growing the game, etc., etc. The previous model just wasn't working. Go back to when the Championship was founded, and you look at the big gap now between the Premiership and the Championship, just putting... And it was 2.5 million. It was increased in 2015. Just putting 2.5 million into the Championship is not going to solve the issues and the problems of the Championship. So it's a long-term fix, though. So we're putting 4 million into season 25-26, but that can't be all into player salaries. It's into central marketing. It's into facilities investment.
Which you're going to retain an action, is that right? As the RFU?
No, well, no. That's why There's again a separate board has been created, which is
Another
your
board.
team.
Great.
Oh my God!
A couple of extra council members as
But,
well.
they
Let's
wanted-
throw
but
them
they-
in.
but the Championship did not want to become part of the Premiership.
Right.
They said we want to manage our own affairs, and therefore we want to run it ourselves. So it's Championship club representatives on there, and it's RFU with an independent chair who's Simon Gillam, who's coming in from Brive in France, whatever. So it's a long-term build to get this back, but the previous model just wasn't working.
Right. So are you making progress in this discussion? I would throw at you, you're not, if it's the Championship that's agitating the referees union to call the SGM. Or have I got that wrong?
No, we are making progress on it. So we've gone through the EOI, the expression of interest. There will be a club which is nominated. I don't want to talk about that at the moment.
In what regard, sorry?
Well, to expand the league to 14 teams.
Right.
So you'll have one that will go up.
Yes.
There'll be no relegation.
Currently Richmond, top of Div 1.
Yeah. So
and you will put, and the one will come back, which
one additional one.
And I'm going to put words not into your mouth, but it's going to be one of London, Irish, Worcester, or
not necessarily.
Wasps. So others have applied from outside of that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think it was 17 clubs applied for it.
Okay.
So you've got some great clubs out there who say, right, if that's the minimum standards I need to get into the Championship, okay, I'm going to go for that. And it's going to take me X number of time to get a really sustainable long-term business plan in place, but I want to go for that league. So we've got a lot of interest to go in for that. You also want to have national geographical spread. You want to have more clubs in various different parts of the country. It's all a bit condensed at the moment. The difference, the French benefit from the fact their country's 3 times bigger than ours, and you don't have those clusters of clubs in the same areas who are all sort of competing for the same sponsors, same fans, all the rest of it. So we need to spread it out a little bit, but it'll be a long-term fix.
Okay.
And there is promotion relegation.
Yeah.
There is promotion relegation. This has been said a long time, but you've got to meet minimum standards to get there. And I can understand that and support that in terms of what it takes to be a Premiership club. You know, if you can't,
losing
we've reduced
3 mil a year.
Come on in.
Basically, yeah.
And we've reduced the capacity that you need to hit to qualify for that. So it's now 5,000, 7,500, 7,500, 10. So we smoothed that road and made that road easier to achieve.
So at what point will the lights come on and the new PR department at the RFU go live with an incredible breaking news story that there is peace, harmony and excitement about a Premiership and Championship?
We've got 85 teams. Oh shit, someone spelled it wrong. We've got 4 teams. We're ready to get 80 million. Oh fuck, we bought it.
They're playing netball. How's that happened?
I spelled it on the computer.
Are we 3 months, 6 months, 5 years? Will we ever see it in our lifetime?
From announcing the new...
From everybody saying, great, we're happy, we're going to go for it.
Premiership 2.
Not Premiership 2, because they don't want to be part of the Premiership. It's Championship rebrand.
Nouveau.
Well, let's see how it goes. I mean, it's
in our lifetime, again.
Well, it'd be nice if it's in our lifetime, yeah.
And your tenure as the RFU.
That gives you a couple of weeks, Bill. I'm joking. But I mean, are we getting close, or is there still a lot to go through?
We are getting close to what that Tier 2 league is. I mean, you're trying to change something now that's been not functioning for a while.
Well, the RFU or the Championship?
The Championship.
The whole
Rugby,
the whole game.
Couple from social media. Rob Godfrey, why did you put up with Eddie Jones for so long?
Why did you put up with him for so long?
Can I rephrase that as well? How damaging was the fallout when you've got players like Danny Kerr saying, 100 Test England legend, saying the environment was toxic?
It probably sold a lot of books for him coming up there when he did. Danny seems to be pretty pro Eddie on many occasions as well. I mean, Eddie, there came a point where Eddie left, or we chose to let him go.
So nothing ever came across your desk from employees in the coaching staff who were moved on, from players? Nothing ever came to you saying this environment is not what it should be?
No, I mean, everyone knows Eddie's a tough, uncompromising character. I'd speak to some of the players there and they'd say, if you really want to perform at your best, he gets the best out of you, and he sets a different level in terms of this is what you've got to do if you want to really be successful. So was he a taskmaster? Well, you know better than I would. Absolutely he was. I spoke to, if not all, most of the exiting coaches. Anthony Seibold I spoke to, John Mitchell I spoke to, Simon Amor I spoke to, Wisemantle. Spoke to them all in terms of, none of them said this is absolutely toxic and this, that and the other's going on. Is it because they didn't want to tell me? I don't know. But no, I didn't have anything come across my desk saying it was, you knew it was a tough environment, but nothing of what you may be hinting at.
Mark asks, are you genuinely happy with the state of English rugby at all levels right now?
Well, clearly not. Otherwise, we wouldn't be getting on the road. And there's some real challenges there. But I do think there's an awful lot of positives going on. If you look at the performances of the England team recently, really disappointing on the final results, and we're losing by 1 point here and 2 point there, and you get fed up saying could have, should have, and all the rest of it.
It's all right. The women will save you.
But I think, I think what Steve's putting together there is really exciting. If you look at the style of play and where it's going with that, I'm really excited about obviously Women's World Cup this year. And what's going on there. I'm confident that we've taken the fragility out of the RFU financial business situation, so that's stable going forward for the next cycle. We've talked about the pathway. I look at that coming through now. I actually see a community game at the moment, which, dare say, it seems to be in decent health when you go around the place at the moment, but we've got these frustrations that are coming through. And they have to be addressed.
We started at the top of last show talking about and we started this show talking about the succession moment, right? How did they balls up getting rid of you? Or because what we were told is that they didn't do it properly in action to get rid of you. So first of all,
that wasn't getting rid of it. It was calling the SGM.
Calling the SGM,
Did they fill in the paperwork?
that's what I wanted.
So it's the Rugby Football Referees Union,
right? Okay.
Who, by the sounds of things, were briefed by
the championship clubs.
Or a couple of them. So they send a letter out, which the referees associations are upset with because they say they haven't been consulted. So they send a letter out with the list of these things that we're not delivering on, like the finances, the RFU, the cost of getting rid of edits.
And this is the referees?
This is the referees union, right? Send this out, which is why Wayne responded, because he had no idea about it and didn't agree with what was in there. That goes out to clubs all around the country.
Right.
And you need 100 to have a SGM.
Right.
And I think the figure was 151, I think it's come back. So we were sitting in the office, got notification that a request for an SGM was going to come in. It came in, but you've got to actually have signatories from the clubs. And all that came in was a list of clubs. There was no signatories on it. So our head of legal went back and said, if you want to have an SGM, we've got to have the signatories involved. So can you go back and get the signatories on it? So then and we'd sent that out, and we'd actually released a thing saying we've received a request for an SGM, but we haven't got the signatories. So at the moment, it's not valid. So I think within about 2 hours, they
That's
then
the
sent
one
through
thing
about
you
300
respond to with everything that's coming over. It's the one thing you've responded to with everything that's going on.
That's a load. We do respond a lot.
Do you know,
we do respond a lot.
But
the big PR
the message isn't getting through.
SGM, they want to get your signatures.
My frustration...
What
I didn't think it coming in, but my frustration for you is all the good things that are going on. You are being battered by the referees union, who are cross about the championship and Premiership promotion and relegation. I'm just like,
I don't think they're cross about it.
Well, I know they're not, but that's the message that they've sent through. So it wasn't a low blow to you. I'm just like.
No, but it was quite funny because that is the one thing that came out in the statement. All the important stuff you could have come out with. Okay, so what happened? So then you asked them you put the press release out. We've had an SGM called, but they haven't filled out the signatures properly. And then what happened?
And we had to do that because you've got the media saying we've been told an SGM request has come in. Yeah. So you've got to go back and say, well, actually, we've got it requesting, but there aren't any signatures around this thing. I mean, it could have been just completely speculative. Yeah. So you go back, you say, but it hasn't complied with X, Y, Z. Yeah. So we then got those emails in, and then the SGM goes off. So now we've got to go back and say, yep, SGM accepted, fine, here's the date. So as I said, I think at the very start, it's going to be probably around the end of March.
Just to add to that, and for the detail, again, for those of you who haven't followed this that closely, well done if you're still with us, but it's very interesting. What's very apparent is that you have got support within the walls of power at the RFU, and I'm referencing Sir Bill Beaumont, interim chair, as we said, who has said, and I quote, having seen all countries wrangle the same problems, I can say with confidence in comparison to many other countries, the RFU has come out of this period very well. Wayne Barnes, who we've referenced a couple of times, I quote, when calling for the meeting, the SGM, they, the Rugby Football Referees Union, have used inflammatory language and provided inaccurate information. Having spoken to the secretary of the RFRU, he told me that most of the misleading wording was provided by the Championship Club representatives. Again, I quote Genevieve Shaw, who's the ex-chair of the RFU's Remuneration Committee. She says she's extremely comfortable with the LTIP scheme that we've touched on, with an increased salary of £742,000 as well. Shaw explained, I feel the RFU board is run incredibly professionally and lives up to any FTSE 100 standard. I think if the executive team have hit the heights and the targets that were set for them, that is all that you can ask. The challenge you've got, as we've said, is already coming from the referees. You reference this, it's also worth mentioning, the SGM has been called. A flat vote at the SGM cannot remove you, but what it will do, and the rebel clubs we're talking about at this point, they can only use the SGM to put pressure on the board to have you sacked. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So what actually constitutes the SGM? Is it everybody into a room at Twickenham with biscuits and
Well,
coffee and off you go?
It'll be a hybrid. So you'll have some people there in person. You'll have
Million
your
quid worth
rest
of
hybrid.
expenses.
And is it
cakes.
sort of like a trial in that you have to put your case forward and they put theirs and
Well, you can vote. You can vote leading up to it as well.
right?
So we'll be tracking votes and seeing how that's going on the way through. We'll get on the road, as I mentioned. We'll do the road show and speak to people.
Should you not release a statement with all everything you've just talked about now in a black and white form, one page, and gone this, this,
No,
this?
that will go out.
Oh,
so
fine.
so Bill, as the interim chair, has got to issue a statement saying, right, the SGM is now being called for this particular date, and that will have with it some of the points in terms of contesting some of the statements that they make. So that will go out.
When this happens, and we spoke on Friday just to sort of converse before this show, but when this sort of thing happens and you think of anybody at the FA and the ECB, we've seen it a number of times at the RFU, when the tide goes out on a situation like this and the mob start chanting, very, very rarely does the tide come back in. Are you in full belief and confidence, and have you got the energy to turn this around?
Yeah, I've definitely got the energy. I mean, the easiest thing to do now would be walk away.
Have you thought about it?
No. The easiest thing to do now would be say, right, I've had enough of this stuff. I've had enough of this political crap that goes on. It's worse than Succession. I've had enough of all that stuff. Why bother? Go away, take a holiday for 6 months, go whatever, and just flush rugby out your system. I can't do that. I wouldn't do that. It's just unbearable to think I would just take that easy option out. We've got some great stuff that we've developed, and we're just starting to land into the game. I know what's going on behind the scenes. I know who's involved in it. So I'm not just going to walk away from those characters either. So I'm going to stick it out. If the board tells me to go, that's fine. That's it. You go. If they don't tell me to go and they believe I'm doing a good job, and I do believe I'm doing a good job, then I'll stay. And if that means taking a load more stick and flak, then okay, I'll stay. But then you've pointed out some of the things we've got to do better. You've pointed out how we've got to communicate better, be more transparent, come on to more, not just yours, but other things
we've started the knocking down and rebuild.
So yeah, if we've got to do more of that to get the message out, absolutely do that. But no, I'm not just going to walk away.
Phil on Instagram asked, why are you staying on when you've clearly lost the confidence of most of the game, including most of the men's senior team squad? I presume he's referencing the England squad is understood, and I'm again paraphrasing and reading from an article. Frustrated and disappointed at the size of the bonus payments made to senior figures at the Rugby Football Union.
Who put that
Who
together?
the fuck's said
Well,
that?
put that together at the players.
I've spoken to players.
My question is,
Yeah.
have you spoken to senior members of the
Yes,
England leadership?
absolutely.
And how is the relationship with them?
Well, the ones I've spoken to, absolutely fine. And I've spoken to the senior ones, the ones that have been around a bit.
Yeah.
So we had an evening, I won't tell you where, but we had an evening of about 3 hours discussing this. It wasn't a confrontational conversation. We were talking about, I was explaining the LTIP because I want to make sure they had a clear understanding what the LTIP is. I took them through my salary, so they had a clear understanding of what that is. And we were discussing the players deal, and we were discussing also how do you market players better and get more razzmatazz into the game and build on that and create personalities. And they were very
Did I miss
supportive.
the invitation for that?
And they were very supportive.
At the end of 2023, you said England are on the cusp of something spectacular.
Yeah, it was all this stuff.
All this stuff.
It was all this stuff. It was all, look, it's taken us a long time to get this PGP. I hate talking about PGPs. It's so formal and structured and sounds very RFU. But it took us a long time to get this.
It's got a board.
It's got a long time. It took a long time to get that deal done, which is the first step in having a fully integrated way you manage the professional game in England. I'm really excited about the women's game and what's going to happen this year around that. I was really excited to be finally we've got financial stability coming out of all these cycles of turmoil. You had the Allianz deal. We're going to announce some other ones coming through as well. The pathway, I do get a lot of encouragement at what's happening with the pathway. So you look at all of that and you think, actually, yeah, we've got a lot of positive stuff going on here, and that's something to stick around for.
How close was that?
Do you think that if you were selling sponsorship of RFU and you were selling sponsorship of the Premiership, I'm just wondering, could you get more deals that would elevate where they are now if you were selling the whole thing?
Yeah, possibly.
But then are you always going to get frustrated by one or two people who own a club saying, no thanks, we don't need that?
I think.
Do you think club owners actually don't want parity?
I think going forward now, with the steps we're taking, I think that will be okay. I mean, the problem you then get into with a sponsor is they might say, well, actually, I just want the international game, or I just want the club game, because you get more frequent matches. So you can't force them into doing a deal which works for both of you. But no, I can see that happening much more often. Where you go to a sponsor, you say, "This is the entire package." That's what we're doing around the Nations Cup and how we're going to market with the broadcast rights. Like, you can have the whole lot. You can have Six Nations. You can have Nations Cup. You can have British and Irish Lions. You can create your own separate rugby channel, independent rugby channel, and that hopefully will drive up a lot of value in terms of the broadcast rights.
Do you expect to be in position on the 1st of April?
I don't even think about it. Honestly, I mean, you'll say, "Oh, you're bound to say that." I really don't think about it.
Well, there's nothing you can really do about it.
You just focus on what you can do. You control what you can control. So I know what we're going to do between now and then. We've talked about all of the issues. We've talked about where it's coming from and what has to be done in terms of getting the right story out there. All I can do is do that. What happens after that is not in my control.
Would you ever play dirty, or did you just do it straight back?
You need to be paying a little bit more to tenure or whatever it's called. What do you get if you put 60 grand in the pot for 3 months rather than 30?
12 days.
Very good maths, Tins. Very good maths. I don't know how you find the energy. For me, the beach towel would be a much preferable option.
But
to this.
I also think it's something you should always take away is just doing things like this. It's so easy to attack people when they don't know you or they don't have a perception of it. And you look at Djokovic on the weekend where he didn't do the interview and then immediately just went and said, "By the way, this is why I'm not doing it." It shuts it down before it is.
The fear of saying the wrong thing and not doing anything is better than saying something sort of right and wrong. But leaving silence is just not the way forward, I don't think. And I honestly, when we muddle about the show, when I came in to do the show and I was thinking about stuff and I tried to be a bit more informed about what was going on, and I said the thing about the bonus, we said off thing, I would have taken it, not because I always joke about being financially sort of led, but to be honest with you, all the things you've said, where it was put in place, the reasons it was put in place, not asking for it, deferring, all this kind of stuff. You look at it, I would have done that. What I've learned through this whole process, genuinely, there were so many things I had no concept or no idea were positive. And like I said, we will see the fact checking on stuff. Like, I'm not saying you're not accurate, but I would say it would be a pretty brave move to come on and bullshit everyone, because at some point,
you're not doing any fact checking. That's for sure.
I won't fact check, but I just think for me, I've learned a lot about the kind of the process, and I think there are more positives about it. And I think there's so much misinformation and so much that is badly handled in rugby that there is never a clear picture of what the actual truth is, what's happened. Reading about Wayne Barnes, I had no idea it was the referees getting involved again, but not even the ones that should be involved. It was just misinformation, badly handled, not accurately done. It's a really interesting thing, and I think hopefully the light will come out and we'll get clarity and the right decision will be made, whatever that is,
But at minimum, coming on this show, you get a bottle of our award-winning gin, which is for when you go. Our tagline is "Ride the storm, celebrate the sunshine."
Oh, right, okay.
So once you come out of the storm, you have a glass of that.
I need one of those now.
£1.50 goes to a fund that goes back to rugby players, so should be served in every corporate hospitality in Twickenham, if you can help with that.
And if you want to pop any of your
Okay.
exit bonus into the Black Eye Rugby Field as well, that's open for business.
Thanks.
Fair play.
Thanks very much.
Thank you for coming on.
Pleasure.
And good luck with the roadshow.
All right.
We will wait to see what happens.
Well, we don't have to worry about a bad PR show from it. We're not going to get a bad PR report.
Good luck.
All right.
Rather you than me, but Bill, thank you very much indeed for coming on.
Great.
Cheers,
Thanks for
Bill.
having
Good
me.
man. Cheers, Bill.
Well done. Now, with round one of the Guinness Men's Six Nations fast approaching, time once again to get out and ask who will claim the crown this year. Fear not, Dream Team. We have got you covered, because you can join us live at O'Neill's Wardour Street in Soho on the 28th of January for an exclusive Guinness Six Nations preview featuring none other than the Hoff himself and the legend that is Sir Rory Best, your former Lions teammate, of course, Hask.
The event kicks off at 6:30. Perfect time for a pint of beautiful Guinness, followed by an action-packed discussion on all things Six Nations at 7:30. Tickets are just £5 excluding fees, and if that wasn't enough, your tickets includes a free pint of Guinness or Guinness 0.0 if you're doing Dry January. Head over to Eventbrite and search GBR to secure your spot now.
And for those of you not heading to the games, one thing is for absolute certain, O'Neill's has you covered, delivering the best atmosphere on the high street. There is no better place to watch the action this year, with big screens that take you right to the heart of the game and the perfect pint of Guinness in hand. O'Neill's is the unbeatable choice for the Guinness Six Nations fans. Head to your nearest O'Neill's or book online to grab the best seat in the house. It's almost time, ladies and gentlemen. As you can imagine, and as we move on, we would ramble on and on every week, and that would be even more of a headache for our producers, competing for our voices to be heard if it wasn't for our team calling time on us every week. But that is about to change thanks to our new partners at Wob Group. Whether you're looking to purchase or part exchange your timepiece or simply want the chance to win your dream timepiece, Wob Group has you covered. Let me tell you more, because Wob Group is also for rugby fans, where you can win hospitality at Twickenham, Principality and Murrayfield for the upcoming internationals. And it's with thanks to Wob Group that every month we will be putting one lucky grassroots player to the test alongside one of the boys, all in the name of winning a cash prize of up to £5,000. I said
£5,000. Just a quick question: if we win it, do we get £5,000?
No, we don't.
We get a free watch.
Do we?
No.
Wob
No,
Group.
we don't do that.
We need to look at the
No,
rules.
it's for a listener, a viewer, a social media follower to dial in and get involved. And that £5,000 could be the difference in helping take your club to the next level, or perhaps even just have the social of the decade. We are available for hire for that. The contestant and their glamorous assistant will need to identify up to 6 mystery rugby players based only on the clubs that they have represented in their career. So if you think you have what it takes, please head to the link in the episode description to fill in the entry form with your club name and details for your chance to win. We will be randomly selecting a winning club member once a month, and we will then invite them onto the show to see how much cash they can grab in our fabulous, it's got the most incredible name as well, but we'll reveal that a little bit down the tracks. Get involved now and watch this space for the chance to win up to £5,000 to help your grassroots club. On the subject of grassroots, a massive shout out to Sedgley Park captain Matt Riley, who played his 450th game for the club. He made his club debut in 2006. Matt holds the record for the most appearances for a single club in the professional era in the UK. That is what they call a shift. Well done to you, sir. A doff of the cap to Sedgley Park's captain Matt Riley. For extra content, don't forget to subscribe to The Lock-In, £3.99 per month. And our book, Would You Believe It?
Would you Adam and Eve it?
Would You Adam and Eve It is not only in the top 10, it is number 8 in the list of best-selling sports books for 2024. It is the biggest-selling rugby book of the year.
You're welcome.
And well done, James Haskell. I can't say any more than that. Certainly no praise or gratitude to you or me, Haskell.
No, you never read it. You got someone else to read it. I'm the only one who read the thing.
And look how well it's done. If only you contributed a little bit more to the success of GB.
We want to have the old butcher of Kennington should let me flow more in the stories.
Well, maybe we just found your lane.
Books, excellent. Written word.
And it's on the written word.
Perfect.
If you fancy diving into Good Bad Rugby Unleashed, the hardback is out. And apparently the softback, paperback, is not too far away. The audiobook is out as well, particularly if you're having trouble sleeping.
We did see some of the Amazon feedback was incredible, but somebody said, that there was all the same stories in the podcast. I can categorically tell you these are things that we couldn't possibly say because we're sponsored by Continental, for example. These are all the hidden gems, the interworkings, the relationship, the machinations of 3 unlikely friends creating a world-class podcast. Why aren't you listening or reading it now?
And one who swims upright. Can you guess who?
Like a giant seahorse.
Thank you for tuning in to The Good, The Bad and The Rugby in partnership with our good friends at Continental Tyres. Our go-to for premium tyres, whether on the rugby field or the road, safety always comes first. And also, unlike this show, Continental Tyres are award-winning. However, Good Scans Rugby is award-winning. Their trophy cabinet is certainly bigger than ours. Do go and check it out if you haven't already subscribed. And as we have said a number of times, 2025 is going to be a huge year for our girls. A reminder, you can now watch the full podcast on Spotify as well as YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review and follow us on social media for the latest rugby updates. We're a Folding Pocket production. This episode was produced by Tom Edwards. See you next week.
You've been listening to The Good, Yay, The Bad, and The Rugby, Oof, with Alex Payne, James Haskell and Mike Tyndall. Thanks for listening.